Jesus made. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand. When darkness seems to hide his face, I rest on his unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand. His covenant, his blood, support me in the whelming flood. When all around my soul gives way, he then is all my hope and stay. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand. He shall come with trumpet sound, oh may I then in him be found, dressed in his righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand.
All right, you may be seated. Thanks for singing along with me there. Good theology in those songs, good words in them. Martin Luther's song, A Mighty Fortress, fits pretty good with our sermon today because it's about suffering, because a lot of stuff in Job's about suffering. And he was a fellow that suffered a lot. He had people after him, bounties. He was a wanted man, and they weren't going to be nice to him if they got him. If you could think about church history, what happened to John Huss. They said, let's just come and talk 100 years before Martin Luther, and when he came and talked, they burned him at the stake. So I'm sure something like that would have happened to Martin Luther at any time if they would have got a hold of him. So it was a tough time, and he made that song that really is about the devil, that the devil can't do anything against us because we got the Lord on our side. And there's no reason worrying about him, because God's much more stronger, and in one little word shall fell the devil. And Jesus speaks it there. It says in the end of Revelation. But here in Job 21, we have, I wrote the name of the sermon, The Wicked Prosper and the Righteous Suffer. Definitely not something you'd see on Trinity Broadcasting Network, at least for the most of the speakers there, all right? It's not, prosperity gospel at all. This is like the anti-prosperity gospel chapter of the Bible, okay? So if you get somebody caught up in the prosperity gospel and you want to share with some good truth, read Job 21 to him, because he is really fighting against the prosperity gospel in this whole chapter. And if you sum it up a bit, I've put the first three things here. The wicked are often happy. The wicked are rarely punished, and the wicked even prosper in death. They have great, big, giant, elaborate funerals, and everything seems to be just fine for them. And all of Job's friends at this point keep trying to point to Job and saying, since all 10 of your kids have been killed, since you lost all your wealth, since you got sick, it's a sign that you're a sinner. It's a sign that you're not right with God. because those that follow God don't have those things happen to them. And Job is letting them know this time, yes, it does happen. And I've wrote at the bottom here, this is the first time in all half of the book of Job that we see Job pronounce the whole theory of suffering as false. Because that was the theory of suffering then, and often it's the theory of suffering in our day too. You know, even us, we might get caught up with that at times and think, well, the reason that guy's got it so bad is because he's such a sinner. Well, there's some folks that have it so bad that aren't sinners and love God like crazy. And that's just not the right way to lump it all together like that, okay? We're going to see, there was a story. There was a church, we could call it a Baptist church, because us Baptists do this sometimes. I've done it. I've gone door to door. I've hit just about every door in this neighborhood. I've had communities tell me, you better leave, we're calling the police. I said, well, I was a bad guy. And I do assault evangelism. I'm just inviting them to church and to an activity we're doing and ask them if I can pray for them. You know, it's not anything too intense. Ask them, I guess I do when I go, I ask them, I say, if you die today, do you know where you go? Do you have assurance of your salvation? That really is a big gospel question. And a lot of folks don't like that question. Some of them argue that you can't know. And I try to show, I said, well, would you like me to show you? And then most of them say no. But I'm available for the other folks. But here's a story of a couple guys who were going door to door. This wasn't me, but I'm just using an example. And one of the deacons says to the pastor, he says, as they're going up to this one house, it's like, I don't know if you've ever been on my street on Benbow Road. There's one house, it's like a $2 million house. It's tremendous. My house is not a $2 million house. But there's a house on my street that is like, it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's tremendous. And it really looks like luxury, got all kinds of fancy stuff. And you can picture going to a house like that, and you see the guy has everything he wants in life, and everything's good. And one guy says to the other guy, he says, are you sure that we have good news for him? Because the gospel is good news. You know, when you're going to share the good news of Christ crucified, that's good news. But for a fellow that has everything, would that be good news to him? Would he consider it good news? That kind of fits pretty well with what we're going to talk about today. It is good news, but indeed that guy may not realize it is good news, because he already thinks that he's got all the good news that he needs. Only speech where all remarks are confined to the friends and not in prayer. And if God is to be worshipped for gain, why would the rich submit? You know, if you look at a lot of these TV programs, they actually try to lure people like that with like a fish hook. They're like, you know what? If you believe in God, you're going to be rich. If you believe in God, you're going to get healed. If you need healing, send me a lot of money, and I send you a prayer cloth that you can lay on your broken body part or whatever it is. You see that. It is advertised on our TV. It is mainstream evangelicalism in America on the television. And it's terrible. And it's all around. And it's what we're going to see here. If God is to be worshipped for gain, why would the rich submit? If that's the lure, you know, I'm going to get rich, I'm going to get healthy. Why would some multimillionaire guy care about that at all? What's that going to mean to him? He already is rich. He knows how to get more rich. He's getting more rich all the time. Why would he be interested in that? That's not the Bible's way. And we got to be careful. We don't ever look at that as the Bible's way either. And I tell you, I think I told the story before, but I had a friend once when I was in high school, and I would go to all these Bible things nonstop when I was a young fella. And he lived in Independence, and he went to Ernest Angley's church once. It's on the TV on Channel 55. And he said, Ernest Angley was saying, who's got $500 for me today? Who's got $500? And some little old lady said, sitting next to him that was really stinky, said, I have it. I have it. And he thought, and I thought, that's probably her whole Social Security check. It's everything she had that month. And she's just going to dump it into his offering, because he's telling him, if you give everything you got, God will bless you 10 times more and make you rich, make you healthy. And that was a lie that was being taught, and that's still being taught today in a lot of places. And even Job's friends may not have been at that extreme. That is the side where they were on. That's the side Job was kind of on himself before all this happened, with the way he thought things worked before all these terrible things happened to him. And he's glad to know, hey, you know, he has seen it. He goes, look around. He's going to say, go out there and look outside your little worldly spectrum and go into a farther part of the world and see there's a lot of righteous people suffering in terrible ways, and there's a lot of wicked people prospering like you wouldn't believe, and not just for a little while, but sometimes all the way through death they prosper. So that's what Job's going to point out in this sermon. It says, then Job answered, listen carefully to my speech, and let this be your way of consolation. So he's basically saying, shut up and be silent like you were at the start. Stop this painful nonsense. Because if you remember when Job lost all 10 of his kids, when everything was lost from all his wealth, when he got a terrible disease on his body, and he was laying there in the ash hump and the trash heap, and probably stinky flies, I can imagine, all around him, probably on his body all over. His friends come and sat with him for 7 days and didn't say a word. And that was the end of chapter 2. And that was a good thing that they did there. It's a good thing for us to follow too. If we know people suffering, we don't have a lot of answers, we go be with them. Okay, that's a good thing for us to do. I tell you, I'm doing my dissertation on hospice chaplaincy and how we can do it better. Basically, that's probably the #1 antidote. Just go be with somebody. Don't tell them anything. Just sit with them in their suffering. That will go so much farther than anything that you could bring for words or wisdom or anything else, is just to go to be with them. So Job is letting them know, just listen, and let this be your way of consolation. Let this be the way that you comfort me. So you're just listening to me. That's what he tells his friends. And it has been painful, and it has been hard for Job, and this is the 6th time that Job has spoken as we've been talking through Job. So it's gone back and forth 6 times. And he says, bear with me that I may speak. Then after I have spoken, you may mock. As for me, is my complaint to man? And why should I not be impatient? So he's letting them know he wants to be heard. And like I said, suffering people want to be heard. You know, when you come across somebody suffering, let them tell their story. I tell you, I'm finding chaplaincy is really a lot easier than what some folks may make of it. If you just ask to hear the person's story. You're like, tell me your story. Tell me what happened. How did all this come about you? Man, they take all kinds of good medicine for that folk to tell you their story. You know, is anything going to change? Not like where you can touch, but I tell you, it does help you feel better when somebody hears you share your story. So he's saying, bear with me that I may speak. And he says, and after I've spoken, then you may mock. He knows they're going to still make fun of him. They're still going to tear him apart. I don't think they think they're making fun of him. It's much more vicious. There's one thing if you're kind of teasing somebody and you know you're joking them, and they kind of know you're joking them too. But it's something else when you're doing that to somebody and you know the response is very sad on their part and you keep doing it. That's where things get very dark and evil. But he says, is his complaint to man? He's like, I'm not even complaining to you guys. I'm not trying to tell you, you know, it's your fault why I'm like this. He's basically complaining to God. He's saying, God, why have you done all these things to me? Why did you kill all my kids? Why did you take everything from me? Why did you destroy my health? He's letting them know, like, hey, don't take offense at what I'm saying to you. I'm not pointing you at the finger that you're the one that caused the trouble. I mean, he is kind of pointing finger over here saying, come on, quit being sorry comforters. You know, he has said that already. Our sorry comforters are all of you. He has told them that. But he's not trying to say they're the ones that caused all this stuff. And he's saying, why shouldn't he be impatient? I tell you, all of us, when we have a lot of trouble, a lot of pain and hard times going on, it is a struggle of patience, a very hard struggle of patience. And when you see other folks, we shouldn't always think, well, they should be the Superman and not have any kind of impatience. He's like, you know, why shouldn't I have some impatience? He's got all the reason to have some impatience. He says, look at me and be astonished and put your hand over your mouth. And even when I remember, I am disturbed and horror takes hold of my flesh. So he's still trying to tell him, like, put your hand over your mouth. Stop talking to me and all the nonsense you've been talking to me. And then he tells him, you see that he fears God. He says he is disturbed. He's shaking. He's like literally shaking. He has horror take hold of his flesh. He has like the tremors. If you've seen some guys in terrible situations or ladies and they're shaking real bad and things because things are so bad, that's what Job is pointing out. He's like, I have horrible horrors in my flesh. I'm shaken. And really, this is a picture that prefigures the undeserved hell that happened to Jesus Christ on the cross. Because when Jesus was on the cross, I told you before, some guys like John Calvin, you know, nobody disagrees with the Apostolic Creed, but some people disagree with where hell happened after Jesus. So John Calvin believes hell happened on the cross for Jesus. That those 3 hours of pitch black darkness that happened was God the Father was pouring out all the wrath, all the judgment of every one of our sins on Jesus Christ on that cross. And he felt every bit of it. He felt the judgment of eternity that all of us would feel, of all time, of all believers, both before Christ and after Christ, on that cross. And Jesus never even sinned one time, so it was completely undeserved. So here's like a little picture of undeserved suffering is what Job is going through, and he's feeling these horrors in his flesh. And if that had never happened with Jesus on the cross, undeserved grace would have never been possible. And truly every one of us that has salvation today, that's got a place in heaven, that's been washed of our sins, it's undeserved grace. None of us have deserved it. None of us earned it. None of us worked for it. None of us were ever able to. Nobody is able to. It's undeserved grace. So if there wasn't undeserved suffering, there never would have been undeserved grace. I tell you, some people have a big problem when you start off with total depravity and you let them know, hey, we're all sinners and we all need God. They're like, wait, no, I'm not a sinner. Well, there's no way you can get past that to the gospel if they don't recognize they're a sinner. Because if they think they're good and they're just going to die and go to heaven and everything's fine, they're never going to have a Savior. They never are. They've got to realize that they're a sinner in their desperate condition that they have before they can realize that they need a Savior, okay? It's not just a thing that you stay with all your sin and then you get all the glory with God and it's all fine and all okay. No, you realize your bad situation that you're in and that you desperately need a Savior, and God saves you right where you're at. And this is the picture of Job here, like a little picture of Job. A lot of times in the Bible you see little pictures of things that are going to foretell what's going to happen in Jesus Christ. And I think in Job we do see that some. And we see that the worse is contrasted by the wicked. That he's seeing terrible things are happening to him, but yet we don't see the terrible things happen to the wicked, is what he's going to say. And he says, look at me and be astonished. Like you should be shocked. Look at what's happened to me. This should cause you astonishment and shock. It shouldn't cause them to just point a finger of judgment toward Job, and that's what they've been doing. Why do the wicked still live, continue on, and also become very powerful? Their descendants are established with them in their sight, and their offspring before their eyes. So this question to them invalidates the religious system that they had. Like the TV evangelist guys have, is if you do right, you're going to get good things from God. If you follow God, you're not going to get sick. You're not going to have diseases. You're not going to be poor. It breaks the system because he says, why are the wicked thriving so well and so powerful? I tell you, even in our politics today, we don't even expect our politicians to be, strong Christian believers. We get thrilled when we see a little bit of some Christianity going on. We get thrilled when somebody goes against abortion or something. But we don't expect them to be a full Christian. People talk bad about the guys that are for some things like against abortion and against homosexuality, and they try to say, what about these other things in their lives? Well, you know what? We're just thankful that they're doing some things that are in the right direction. We're not even expecting that. And it's like this picture, why are the wicked so powerful? There are tons of people in high up positions that are very, very powerful who are not Christians and not believers. And if you think about this, it says, their descendants are established with them in their sight and their offspring before their eyes. And we're going to see it's going to come up that they could really care less if their offspring don't do well later, if their prosperity goes away when they're gone. And Habakkuk is the greatest example. Even though, Hezekiah, I wrote the wrong, it's Habakkuk here. Habakkuk asked, and when God told him, Habakkuk was a prophet, and God said, hey, in your days I'm going to do something very great and very powerful. And Habakkuk's like, what is it, Lord? And he says, I'm going to destroy your nation. I'm going to bring the enemy to take you over and make you slaves and kill you and do all these horrible things to you. And he's like, oh no, Lord, why would you do that? How could you, as a righteous God, do that to us, Lord? And God says, just wait, I'm going to do this great and powerful thing in your days. So he was shocked. And he's saying here that the opposite has happened to Job. Job lost all 10 of his kids. All 10 kids were dead, and those kids, he used to pray for them and sacrifice for them all the time. It started off in the first few chapters. And he lost all of his children. Here's the wicked's kids, and they just keep flourishing on and doing fine. And Job 119 is where he lost all his children. Their houses are safe from fear, and the rod of God is not on them. His ox mates without fail, his cow calves and does not abort. So he's showing how good it is for the righteous. And you know one thing that he says, the rod of God is not on him. And we all know that verse, spare the rod, not the child, different things, for discipline and stuff. We know that the Bible says that those whom God loves, he disciplines, which means he beats us with his rod a little bit. Sometimes we're all like, please God, stop the beating, okay? Paul said one time he despaired of death itself. He was such in a terrible condition, and he felt that things had gotten so bad. Paul called out to God once. He said he had a messenger of Satan, a thorn in the flesh, and he prayed 3 times, God, please take it away. And God said, my grace is sufficient for you. He didn't take it away. He left it there with him. All right? Sometimes this rod of God that beats us does feel awful. And Job is saying that the wicked don't have the rod of God beating them. But in the book of Hebrews, it tells us in the sense when you read it in Hebrews that it's a good thing. It should make us feel good that God loves us so much that he does discipline us, that he does guide us, that he does walk us. And I tell you, we can see it in our own society when we see some kids and we see horrible things go on to them, and we sometimes can look back in their history and say, oh, that's why it went on to them, because all these horrible things. I watched a movie. I think it's a good movie. It's made by Stephen King, but it's called Stand By Me. I don't know how many guys saw it. It was made in the 80s, 1986. Happened to be on TV the other night, and I had my boy watch it with me there, and because he's a young guy that's 12, and the movie's all about young 12-year-olds. And it really shows a pretty good picture. One little guy has got an ear that's burned really bad. He's a famous actor, so it's like a fake ear that's burned really bad. But they did a good job in '86 with this burned ear. And they said his dad was so mean that he held him to a stove and burned his ear off, and then had to go to like a psych ward. And then later in that movie, it says that they say all what happened to all the kids when they're adults, and he went to prison for a while, is what they say, and then they lost track of him. How did you think, when you hear about something like that, you think, well, the dad was so mean to the kid, burned his ear off, different things, and messed the whole kid up, and that's why the kid was messed up, right? And that's how we can see things in life sometimes. And he's saying the rod of God of discipline isn't even on the wicked. They're just going forward. But that rod of God, that disciplinary set that we have, should discipline us to go toward the right direction, not toward the wrong direction, all those evil things. And he's saying that the wicked, everything then was, the wealth was in your animals. So if you had a lot of animals, you were a rich man. If you didn't have any animals, you had basically nothing. And he's saying that their oxes mate without fail. They're always having babies. And the cows are having baby cows without any of them dying. They're doing great. And he's characterizing the life of prosperity of the wicked. And saying that the righteous sometimes don't have that. The righteous have the rod of God beating them. They send forth their little ones like the flock, and their children skip about. They sing to the timbrel and harp, and rejoice at the sound of the flute. And this is like a contrast, unlike Job's dead kids. His kids are dead. They're not doing this no more. But the wicked kids are doing just fine. They're partying. They're having a great time. And that's the picture that Job's giving. They spend their days in prosperity, and suddenly they go down to Sheol. They say to God, depart from us. We do not even desire the knowledge of your ways. So he's saying their whole life is lived in prosperity, and then Sheol is also used as the grave. They die, and they're no longer around anymore. And he's saying that the way they said to God was, get away from us. We don't even want anything from you. This is totally in our culture as well, too. How many times do we see it in our culture? People don't want God mentioned anymore. Okay, I remember some years ago, a couple president elections ago, they had the Democratic Party, and they had people say, do we want to support Israel? Do we want to still believe in God? And like half the people were shouting, no, no, and half of them said yes. Unfortunately, they still kind of did a little bit, okay? But I guarantee you, as time keeps going on, it's be more of a 100% consensus. No, we don't want God. We don't want any mention of God. There's groups like Freedom From Religion and all these atheist groups that stop all kinds of things. Even in the city of Brunswick here, the Catholic Church one time has their little festival every year, and they put out some flyers and signs in more places than the city sign over here, the city signpost. One guy in the city who writes the Brunswick Post all the time was so angry, he wrote how he's going to go to Freedom From Religion. This cannot be. Why should he have to see any of this? They were just advertising for a fair that they were having. But since it was from a church, the guy was so furious that the city they sent everybody, they even sent little me a letter. They sent us letters saying you cannot advertise or have signs anywhere that are not authorized. Even though for political elections you could stick a sign in your yard, you could put signs all over the place, the city streets and stuff, but not for God. People don't want to hear about God. It's just like this. They say to God, depart from us, we do not even desire the knowledge of your ways. Which really shows that they do believe. Because how could you hate something you really don't believe in? You know, you just be like, all these folks with their fairy tales, or all these folks with their imaginations. It burns them up inside, because it's a lot more than a fairy tale, and they know that inside. And I wrote here, they have no desire to know God's ways. If you read Romans 1, verse 18 to 32, they have no desire to know God's ways. You know, God calls them reprobate. He's given them over to all the troubles and things right there. And they have no desire at all. You know, when people struggle about their own salvation, assurance of salvation, a good question to ask yourself is, if you were truly someone who's lost and is not saved, would you even care? Would you care that you're going to heaven or you're going to hell? The lost don't care. They could care less. There's no concern whatsoever. There was a book written by John Bunyan, okay? My favorite guy from the Pilgrim Progress book, okay? And John Bunyan, for a long time, struggled that he had committed the sin of unforgiveness. It was this blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. And he struggled with it so long that he wrote a whole book about it. It's a pretty good book. If you want to read it, I think I got a copy of it there. But it's really like a mental struggle, and people even tell him in his church, yeah, you probably committed it because you cursed God, you committed it, and it was in a time that he didn't know what was going on, and then he realizes, you know what, since I am concerned about this, those who have done the sin wouldn't even be concerned about it. They could care less. It wouldn't be something on their heart that would draw them to God. You know, people that are trying to fall after God and get convicted are not the same people as the lost that could care less. And so opposite of Psalm 25:4. Psalm 25:4 is like, Lord, I've hid your ways in my heart, you know, that I might not sin against you. That's not quite it, but it's right in that area there. Psalm 25:4 is that I want to know your ways more, God. I want to come after you more. That's the opposite to these people right here that say, depart from us, God. We don't want anything to do with you. Psalm 25:4 is what we would be. We want to be drawn to God more. Who is the Almighty that we should serve him, and what would we gain if we entreat him? Behold, their prosperity is not in their hand. The counsel of the wicked is far from me. So this is what he's showing with the wicked. They want to know, what's in it for me? Truly, that's the prosperity, health, and wealth gospel. What's in it for me? Even a lot of people as new Christians, maybe you start to come to God because you start to fear hell, or you start to think, I want to go to heaven, or something like this. But that's truly the same way that Satan said in chapters 1 and 2. He said, does Job fear you for no reason? Job has all this wealth. Job has all this stuff. You put a hedge about him. That's why he fears you. So this is the same reasoning as Satan has, is what Job says the wicked have. And indeed, we know Satan is like the leader of the wicked. You know, it came down with Adam and Eve. Who was there? Satan was there, leading Adam and Eve into the way of wickedness. So Satan's reasoning is definitely not God's reasoning. It's not a good way at all. It shouldn't be our reasoning either. But he had the health and wealth type idea, saying, you know what? He fears you because you give him all this stuff. He fears you because he has good health, is what he says, after God tells him the second time, hey, what do you think of my servant Job, who you incited me against for no reason? What do you think of him? And That was Job's idea. What the Satan's idea was is that Job loved God because Job had a lot of stuff. And that's the health, wealth, false gospel motive. And it was not Job's way. He says, the counsel of the wicked is far from me. It's not my way. This isn't what I'm thinking. Okay, he's complaining to God, why are you doing all this to me? But he's not trying to say that this is the system. He's come to a real realization that the system of the religious idea of the day, and still of our day, that the good people get good things, bad people get bad things, is false, and it's wrong, and it's just not true. And if you look around, you can see it. And he points all this out right here, and he says it's not of me. And I tell you, the health, wealth, gospel, false movement, I've seen it. I used to watch it. When I was young and saved, I got caught up with it a bit. I watched these guys on the TV sometimes, and they said, you know, this is how you're going to get rich, and this is how you're going to get healthy, and you're going to demand this, you're going to call it out, you're a little God, and you're going to speak it forward, and that's what it's going to be. And that just dominates their theology, and it's horrible. I mean, there's one thing with positive motivation and trying to not be a negative-minded guy all the time and speak some positive words, but it's a whole other thing when your whole theology is based on, I'm going to speak it out, and it's going to be. Because you know what happens? I've seen it happen to a whole lot of folks through my time. There's a lot of people caught up in those movements. They get real excited. They thrive like the way the seed that falls on the rock that shoots up real fast, that has no root. And then when all the suffering still comes their way, when all the life still happens to them too, they say, well, so much for church, so much for God, that's not helping me, and they move right on out. And that's not something that's good. That's a terrible thing. It's a false gospel, and you can see it makes false converts, because converts don't stick around either. It's a bad way. It wasn't Job's way. It says, how often is the lamp of their wicked put out, or does their calamity fall on them? Does God apportion destruction in his anger? So he's asking, like, does God take their lamp out? How often does calamity fall on them? Not a lot. He sees a lot of wicked people that things are just fine for. You know, we can look at that in life too. We can think of the wicked people and think about the folks in jail and the folks dying of drug overdoses and stuff, and they go, oh, they got what they deserved, they got what happened, they got their consequences. But think of all the wicked in the other direction. Think of all the wicked in the politician realm, okay, type of picture right there. And they're just, every one of them. I don't think there's a politician out there that makes less than a few $1 million a year if you look at the way they bring in all their income. Right. None of those guys is a middle wage, like under $100,000 a year earner. They're all millionaires, multi-millionaires. And I tell you, even if you like one side of politician over the other, they're all that way, okay? And they're not just dropping off, okay? They have quite a bit of goodness that the world would say, like, wow, look how well they prospered. So we can't just think, you know what? Look at the prisons, look at this. Yeah, that does happen in life sometimes to some folks, but it doesn't happen to everybody. And if you look around, think of Job's crowd. Job was the greatest man in the East. That means he was the richest guy. He was the Mike Gates or whoever the richest guy is today in the world. He was that man. His crowd of people were that crowd of people. They weren't the crowd that were going to jail and stuff, you know, and being in prison and executed and things. That was his crowd of people. And he was still a remnant. There still weren't many righteous in that crowd of people. And likely, his friends were probably of that crowd of people too. They probably weren't poor fellas, okay? These guys that came from afar, that knew Job so well, probably were in his class of person, because that's typically the way it works. You know, you don't usually see a fella in poverty best friends with the richest guy around. Doesn't usually happen that way. And we see he's asking, does the calamity fall on them? Where is their destruction? Where's God's anger against all these wicked people that we know that are all doing so well? And it's also pointing out that future punishment of poverty is no deterrent to sin. And this is where I wanted to point out with Hezekiah. With Hezekiah is we're going to see, if you look at Hezekiah, God blessed him with 15 more years to live. He was going to die. A prophet came and he said, hey, you're going to die, you're not going to live. And Hezekiah got down on his knees and he repented. And he said, please, God, please have mercy on me. And God says, because you repented and you prayed to me, I'll give you 15 more years to live. But during that time of Hezekiah's time, God is angry with all the sinful stuff in the nation, and he has a prophet tell Hezekiah, hey, not in your time, but after you're dead, in your children's time, I'm going to drop Israel. I'm going to bring in the destruction. I'm going to make you guys a bunch of slaves. You're going to be defeated. And Hezekiah actually says, well, praise God, it's not in my time. That's terrible. That's terrible. You got to think about your kids. You know, why do we get upset about politics and stuff? Because we want to care about our kids. We love them, okay? We want to see good things come forward for them in the future. Otherwise, we really could say, hands-off approach, I don't care, I'm not voting, I'm not doing anything. But Hezekiah said that, and he was a guy that was a follower of God. But we could see that he was like, well, so much, I got mine, so much for them. And that's his own family. And I wish I could use a bad guy's picture to give that picture, but that was actually a good guy. But he's saying the evil guys could care less what happens after them, as long as they still have their wealth and their riches. Are they as straw before the wind, and like chaff which the storm carries away? You say God stores away a man's iniquity for his sons. Let God repay him so that he may know it. And as straw before the wind, he's saying they are rarely seen. We rarely see one of these guys in our class of folks, of all these rich folks, that fall down into such poverty and suffering and bad ways as I've fallen down. And he's saying it's rare. We don't see it. It's like straw in the wind. I tell you, if a strong wind blew, and I said, hey, did you see that straw? All you guys would be like, I don't know, because that's how fast the straw goes in the wind. It's gone. And he's saying that they're telling him, God stores away a man's iniquity for his sons. Let God repay him so that he may know it. And this is where he says, let his own eyes see his decay, and let him drink of the wrath of the Almighty. For what does he care for his household after him, when the number of his months is cut off? So this is the Hezekiah picture. He's saying, who cares about the rest of this stuff when my time's cut off, because I have it while I'm here. And I tell you, I've seen this. I've seen people die and had a lot of stuff, and you could see that they really didn't care about the people that came after them right there. And they lived a life. They lived a life of luxury, and their kids may not be living a life of luxury of things. And you could just see it as they went. If anything, all they were concerned about was their own death and what was going on. And then I wrote on here, it would be unjust for the wicked not to be judged. So Job is mad. Job doesn't think that they should get away with this stuff. Job doesn't agree with how things are going. And he's saying, let his own eyes see his decay. Let him drink of the wrath of the Almighty. You know, he's saying, let there be justice. And I'll tell you, some people try to go against justice, and there's some religions and churches that say everybody's going to heaven. That's all totally ideological. It has to get personal, and you won't think that way no more. Maybe somebody kills your kids or does some terrible thing and maims you. You would think, I don't want them to get away with that. Justice should be served. I think just this week I read in the news thing, it said how some woman's body was just found or something dead, and they're looking hard for the killers of this woman to satisfy, at least to help the family a little bit, to at least justice was brought about. Justice is a big deal with God, you know, a very big deal. It should be a big deal to us. If justice isn't a big deal, then why do we have court systems, or why do we go to the police if we need some help or something? Or, you know, why do we feel like we want to, why do we all thrive, or a lot of us thrive, I do, when I watch these movies like, I always forget the name of it, Denzel Washington, and he takes down the whole Russian mafia all by himself, The Equalizer. Okay, parts 1 and part 2. Why do we thrive when we see these movies of the evil guy getting it rather than the good guy just being, you know, getting the bad side? Why? Because we want justice. Unfortunately, we don't want justice for ourselves. We want mercy and grace for ourselves. Okay? But in the big scheme of things, by all means, justice is important. And by all means, our mercy and grace that we get, it was done at a price with justice. Jesus paid the justice for us. It didn't just go that God said, a couple people, you guys are okay, just going to forgive you and you're all going to be well. No, he had to send his son to be punished extremely, worse than anybody suffering has ever been in all time on the cross, so that we could be reconciled to God and go to heaven. It wasn't just a good old boy type of thing saying, hey, I know you, don't worry, you're going to be okay. But you guys, you're going to get the hammer. It wasn't like that. There was an extreme price paid for us. So Job is saying he wishes there was justice for these evil fellows. Can anyone teach God knowledge, and that he judges those on high? One dies in his full strength, being wholly at ease and satisfied. This is like our buddy Tony. Some of us know Tony. He always says, Deuteronomy 29:29, you know, the mysteries of God are unknown to us. We can't know the mysteries of God. There's some things that we're not going to ever figure out, and we don't know why. They're God's mysteries. They don't belong to us. They belong to God, the mysteries. And he's saying, can anybody teach God? None of us can teach God. We can't tell God, you know what, God? You've been messing up over here. That guy's a really bad guy. Take him out, okay? I mean, that happened this week in the news. You see that guy Solomon. He was a really bad guy. Got taken out right there. But he's lived a long time as a bad guy, and he died probably so fast he didn't even know it, you know. But sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. But we can't teach God things. God already knows all these things. And he's saying, one dies in full strength, wholly at ease and satisfied. His sides are filled out with fat. Okay, back in the old days, if you were fat, you were pretty wealthy. I kind of feel that way sometimes. I feel like, you know what? I'm doing pretty good. But I know if I want to live a long time and be healthy, I got to be careful and I got to watch what my diet is and stuff. But, you know, you don't see too many fellas that are really poor as really fat. Okay, that doesn't happen all the time. And his sides are filled out with fat, and the marrow of his bones is moist. While another dies with a bitter soul, never even tasting anything good. And Job's life right now is that bitter soul, not tasting anything good. He did for a while taste some very good things. But realistically, we can look around and we can see folks who have been poor from the day they were born to the day that they die, and they love God like crazy. And we can look at them and think, you know what? This is a real strong believer. And you might think, well, why is it that God let them have all the suffering? Every bad thing happens to them sometimes. You think about some folks, they get all the sicknesses, all the diseases, all the bad taxes or the monies or whatever you think fall on these people. And they're still righteous folks right there. And we think, why is it that some folks are like that and some folks that are wicked are so good? And Job is struggling with this. He's like, this is terrible, but this is what's going on. But he is pointing out that death is the great equalizer for all humanity. All of us are going to die. Nobody's not going to die. It's coming. Together they lay down in the dust, and worms cover them. Behold, I know your thoughts, and the plans by which you would wrong me. So Job is saying that all these folks, the wicked and the righteous, all die, and the worms cover them up. Some older lady, she told me a little rhyme that when you die, and the worms will cover you and eat you up, and you won't look so nice or something. I'm going to have her tell it to me again. I think I see her this week, because it's a nice little rhyme, but it sure is true. You're going to die, you're going to go in a box, and eventually worms are going to eat you up. They're going to go in, they're going to go out, and then I think it says, and boy, what a job do they do when the work is all done, or what a wreck do I look like when the work's been all done. I mean, it's kind of a neat little rhyme that she has, but indeed it's true. Everybody one day is going to go to that state. And then he looks at his friends and he says, behold, I know your thoughts and the plans by which you would wrong me. Isn't that horrible that a guy says that to his closest friends in the midst of his deepest suffering? He goes, I know what you're about to say. I know how you want to hurt me. I know how you want to wrong me. So he's going to go on and say a little more to him. He knew their minds weren't changed looking at him. You know, they say that 60-some% of communication is nonverbal, is how we look at each other, is how we are. It's only like 7% verbal or something. I mean, it's really low. It's really amazing. And truly, I don't know if it comes up here or not, but if you look at someone's eyes and speak to them and look at them in the eye, it's harder to say the meanest, worst things right there. So like if you're with somebody and they're like saying all kinds of horrible things, or they're away from you, be like, hey, I'd like to get with you and talk to you and look me in the eye and tell me all these bad things you've been saying about me. Let me know. I mean, some people are mean enough, they'll look you in the eye and say all the mean stuff. But a lot of folks, well, it will kind of change. And if anything, if you think about sending emails or texts, I think about all the time when I send emails, I think a lot of my daily Bibles might sound a little bit too rough sometimes. But if I was able to say it like in this context, it wouldn't be as rough because you can see all this nonverbal stuff and you can connect better. It's hard when you're just reading and you're not having all the nonverbal stuff. So he's with them and he's trying to tell them, he knew that they're going to wrong him. He knows their thoughts. He could look at them. You could talk to somebody, you kind of know what they're thinking. You can know, okay, the guy's agreeing with me, okay, the guy hates my guts, okay, the guy thinks I'm an idiot. He's looking at him and he knows they're about to say some mean things to him. So he says, for you say, where is the house of the nobleman, and where is the tent, the dwelling places of the wicked? Have you not asked wayfaring men, and do you not recognize their witness? So he's saying, maybe in your little realm, like your little church, your little area, you only see that good people get good things and bad people get bad stuff. But he says, go a little, talk to the wayfaring people, talk to the people who travel, and let them tell you what they've seen. You know, I could tell you, I've been to Africa, there's a lot of poverty in Africa, tons of it. And what you see when you see in Africa, and all the African countries, I saw the same thing through all the ones I've been to personally, 3 of them, is the people who are police or mayors or governors, filthy rich, richer than we are, driving BMWs, Mercedes, all kinds of fancy stuff, okay, fancy clothes. The people who are everybody else, they've got bare feet, the tattered clothes, at most they got a moped, and you see a family of 4 with a goat on a moped, jam-packed in a jam-packed road like you'd see 71 or something in rush hour morning with all the people with their mopeds with no shoes on. That's the average people right there, and then you see the other folks. And you can go a little, and you can see when you talk to those folks, the average people aren't the bad people, and the people with everything aren't the good people. A lot of times, the people who were the mayors and the big people, they would tell us, you know what, if you want to come into our country and spend $1 million to help our people as U.S. government, you got to pay us an awful lot of money. And they didn't even get anything from it. And the poor guy that we're giving free services to, we would spend fortunes, okay? I went there on one trip with $40,000 cash in op fund, all $100 bills. It was all gone in 8 days, just for paying people to let us do free cataract eye surgeries for their poor people. Wow. And the poor people didn't have to pay a dime. And the people doing it all didn't have to give anything. We had a couple security guards that really were just smoking, and I wouldn't trust them with my security. And then we had they gave us a facility with that one mission where it was like a filthy dungeon basement, like dark, dank, and moist, and mildew all over. And that's what we had to clean up to give people their cataract eye surgeries. So all that tons of money we paid to the people who are supposed to be the good people, they're not the good people. But the poor people coming were grateful. They were thankful. There were a lot of good folks coming right there. And he's saying, just go about, talk to some other people and see. This idea, this health and wealth gospel, doesn't work out like that. For the wicked is reserved for the day of calamity. They will be led forth at the day of fury. Who will confront him with his actions, and who will repay him for what he has done? So he's letting them know about the day of calamity that the wicked is reserved for. There is a day of fury coming, okay? Justice does happen. While he is carried to the grave, men will keep watch over his tomb. But he's pointing out that even in this life, when the wicked die, they have grand funerals, okay? I tell you, I deal with hospice. There's a lot of folks that are lucky just to be able to get cremated and put into a cardboard box. And they don't even have a showing. They have absolutely nothing. Because they don't have anything and they can't afford anything. And that's it. In fact, I know how the system works here in Ohio, is if the government has to pay for you to be cremated, you are not allowed to have any relatives whatsoever see the ashes. They're gone. They take care of it. There's no service. There's no connection. If the government finds that one person has a job that's related to the person, they won't even cremate that person. It's on that person to do the job. And if nobody does it for a long enough time, the government does it, that's it. You don't get to see the ashes. There's no grave. There's nothing. And this is the way that happens to poor folks and a lot of folks. It's a sad thing. But he's saying the wicked, they're going to die, and they're going to have somebody even watch over their tomb. They're going to have guards over their tomb, and nobody's going to desecrate the body or do anything terrible. They're going to have grand funerals. It says, the clouds of the valley will gently cover him. Moreover, all men will follow after him, while countless ones go before him. So they have all this huge company. Folks in the good life have a huge company. There's all kinds of people that are following this way and keep going that way. He says in the last verse, how then will you vainly comfort me? For your answers remain full of falsehood. And this, I know some of you guys love the book of Ecclesiastes like I do. This word vainly is the same Hebrew word hebel that's used over and over again for vanity of vanities. All is vain, all is vanity in the book of Ecclesiastes. So he's saying, how will you comfort me? Because all you're doing is bringing all this worldly wisdom that doesn't mean anything, and you're trying to tell me I'm evil because God has done bad things to me. And that's not the truth. Okay? And he's saying, only the end will reveal the heart. And we can see that Job is offered for comfort, okay? Job just wants comfort. He's looking for comfort right there. But they're not comforting him. They're not giving him the comfort. And if you read Psalm 73 is just like this. A guy is looking for comfort, and he doesn't have any comfort. He needs comfort from God, and he's in pain. That's a lot of the Psalms connect so good with our emotions and things. And my last slide to sum things up here. Christianity is not about prosperity, okay? If so, your faith is wrong, okay? If people believe that they're going to be a Christian because they want to have all the good things in life and they want to be healthy, they got the wrong faith. They're still not in the faith. It's not genuine. It's false. It's a false convert. That's why I'm so opposed to most of these TV preachers and things that teach that way. It is just horrible, and it does not save anybody. Okay, if people do get saved in that way, it's only because the mercy and grace of God is going to save them no matter what, either way. Okay, but it's not a gospel that's preached from the Bible. And the right idea, because you may say, well, what's the right idea then? Because I really hope I get good things from God. Okay, even heaven, heaven's a good thing we want to get from God. Is the idea of better or worse. Like when you marry somebody, when I've done marriages, and whenever I say marriage, I say you take this person for better or for worse, for sickness and in health. That's how we come to God. That's the kind of relationship we have, that we are not going to separate from Him. Even if all the horrible stuff comes our way, we're going to love Him no matter what. And that's what shows true love. If you think about marriages, none of us would be married if we didn't hold to that. We'd be married for a very short time because trouble comes up and trouble comes down. I talk about the valleys of the shadow of death in Psalm 23, and really there's little valleys every day that all of us go through, especially in our marriages and things, where things will go way down low and we'll think, how am I going to deal with this, or what am I going to do? Other times it's like, this is the greatest day of my life. But it's the way life is in everything. It's in marriage, it's in relationships, it's in friendships, it's in everything. And the right relationship with God is the same one as we have with our wives or husbands if you're a lady, is it's for better or for worse. We stick together and we keep on keeping on, okay? And why should we worship God? Why does God matter? Because He's worthy to be worshipped. Because He's holy. Because He deserves it. Because He is the Creator. Not because of what we can get from Him, but because of just who He is why we're going to worship Him and serve Him despite whatever happens to us. All right? I like that verse that Job said, though He slay me, yet shall I praise Him. Okay? I don't know, I forget what chapter that's in, but we already did cover that one. There was an earlier one. But though He slay me, even if God's going to kill me, I'm still going to lift my hand and praise Him. I think I told you last week, it still impacts me. This one fellow who's a Pentecostal minister that I got to be a chaplain for, that couldn't hardly speak, but I could tell from that nonverbal communication that for a whole hour of me talking and singing hymns and reading the Bible and talking about Jesus with him, it brought him great joy. I could tell too, nonverbal communication, because usually folks fall asleep when they're in bad shape. Okay? He didn't fall asleep for me. He would fall asleep for everybody else. For me, he'd stay awake and he'd watch me. And I knew it meant a lot to the fella. And he knew he was dying. He died for a long time. Like a couple months he went down, maybe longer than that. He still loved God with all his heart. That brought him the joy to give God the praise. And I still remember the last day I visited him, as I started talking about how we know we can trust Him, how nothing can separate us from the love of God. He raised his hand. And he didn't even have much energy to raise a hand. He raised his hand like in worship. And I thought, beautiful. Isn't this amazing right there? And it made me feel so good. Because some folks I serve, I wonder, which way did they go? But this guy, I'm pretty darn sure from his actions, from his belief, from everything that I saw, from the evidence of that, I know which way that he went. And it's beautiful. And a few points to remember from this teaching. We should minimalize the temporary perspective. And I tell you, if you look at any one of my emails, my daily Bibles at least, I have at the bottom a Bible verse, 2 Corinthians 4:16-18, that says, these temporary, momentary, light afflictions that we have are in no ways in comparison to the eternal glory that God has set up for us in the end. That is the right attitude to have in life. And I tell you, there's a lot of times in life I need to remind myself of that and think, I can't get so focused on the little right here and right now and troubles that I have going on. I got to keep that eternal perspective on heaven, on Jesus, on the glory yet to come, because it doesn't even compare with anything that could be going on right here. And we should also, and I wrote here too, that if we lose that eternal perspective, what exacerbates is depression. We can get very depressed and very far down a dark hole if we're just looking at the temporary. And I really see depression summed up in a nonverbal way of a horse with the blinders on the eyes. And the problem is right here. So it's like a dark little box. It's all you've got. It's like you're looking down. And when people are depressed, they can't see anything but the troubles that they have right in front of them. And that's it. And I think, how do you get out of that depression, especially for a believer, is you start to try to pull back a little bit and see that there's still light. There may not be light in the area you're looking at, but there's other light in life. There's something. Nobody has got it so bad that there's no light. Even Job. Job had it horrible. Lost all of his kids, terrible disease, and he still found light in God. He still one time said, I know I'll see him again. I will stand in my flesh before him. He knew about those things, and he held on to that light. And we've got to do that too, or it's going to be rough on us. And we should, opposite side, maximize the eternal perspective. How do we do that? By fixing our eyes on what is not seen, on faith, on what is not seen. Not the problems, but on God and His truth and what's to come and His promises. And then some discussion questions. Do I question God about prosperity of the wicked? You know, I see it so much, and I've been through it, that I don't usually. I look at some guys that are filthy rich and super evil, and I just think, there's another filthy rich, super evil fellow. In fact, I think if we're not of the class of the millionaire class, probably a lot of us have come to believe, that's normal, okay? We're not like Job's friends that are like, have to look around, all right? Do I question God about the persecution of the righteous? Do you think, why, God, did you let all those guys in orange suits get killed, by the ISIS? Or why, God, did you let all these innocent people be killed? Sometimes you may wonder why. And you think, wow, I hope it doesn't come my way, all right? But that's a question that we can ask about sometimes and wonder. But we can look at Job and kind of get a bit of an answer that sometimes there are no answers. We're not sure. We just got to keep trusting Him, okay? It's not a set cookie plate way that the righteous are going to be okay and the wicked are not. When I suffer persecution, what is God trying to teach me? You can tell that I wasn't good with my spelling here in the last slides here today. But this is a hard question. Don't ever say this to somebody suffering that you come to comfort, okay? Say it to yourself. But if you know someone's suffering, this isn't what you want to say. You don't want to say, hey, what's God trying to teach you in all of this?
Yeah.
Now that is true. It is true, but there's nothing you ever want to say to somebody. That's not what you say to them. It's what they say to God, okay?
Yeah.
It's definitely, so don't let me missteer you here and make you a rough person to say that to somebody. Hey, what's God trying to teach you in this, all right? That's rough. That's not going to help anybody find comfort. In fact, the best ways, even when I talk to folks, a lot of folks that aren't even believers, I try to ask a lot of questions. If you really want to see somebody go in a way that maybe you think they need to go, ask a lot of questions and let them come up with the idea. Let them come to the conclusion. Don't say it yourself. But Joni Eareckson Tada, if you know her story, I heard it on Moody Radio this week is where I heard it, is why I put this on. I knew her story, but I didn't know this happened to her. She went diving one day as like an 18-year-old, broke her neck, and now she's like 70 years old or 72, and she has been a paraplegic her entire life. And she's a good Bible teacher. I tell you, she's got some good stuff to listen to, Joni Eareckson Tada. She's sound with the faith. And she got breast cancer, okay? A lady who'd already been paraplegic forever. And you know what her first response was? I wonder what God's trying to teach me in all this. Wow. That's what her response was. That's some deep, heavy faith right there. I don't know if my faith is that deep and heavy, okay? It'd take me some time to get around to this question. But Joni Eareckson Tada's response right away was, what's God trying to teach me now? Was her response. That is tremendous. And that's from a person in deep suffering. It's not from somebody who's outside the suffering looking in. So that is something to think about when you're suffering persecution, when you're suffering troubles. What is God trying to teach me? It could be you might be like Job and you just can't find an answer, okay? Job wanted to know. Job never did get an answer. God never said, this is why I let the devil tear you apart. He never did get an answer, okay? Could be like that for you too. Sometimes it does give us answers though. And all in all though, we're going to read in the end of Job, the one big positive thing is Job, after God questions him, he says that his faith has been deepened. It deepened his faith. So after everything, the one thing hopefully that our suffering is going to do for us is deepen our faith in God. Okay, not make us run from him, but make us come closer to him. And that's all I got. I'm going to go ahead and pray.